and how people, we've already heard that the British Foreign Secretary, who I bumped into yesterday in the King David Hotel, he didn't seem that pleased to see me, I don't know why, but the British Foreign Secretary says, yes, we blah blah blah, but Israel must take more care in avoiding civilian casualties. And people like President Obama and David Cameron, everyone says that. They all urge Israel to take more care. What he should do to take greater care of the civilian people. Because the answer would be, oh, I don't know, because they don't know, because there is nothing further. I was in the army for 30 years in the British Army. I fought this kind of conflict for 30 years, pretty much all of the time, in various different places. Northern Ireland, very different but similar kind of challenges. Afghanistan, Iraq, and to an extent the Balkans. And I don't think there's anything that I can think of that Israel is not doing now to preserve civilian life, except sitting back and just taking it. And of course, that's what many people think you should be doing. But if you look at what Britain did, Britain got a few missile attacks, a few rocket attacks, hurled at it, and we'll look at what Britain's response was. It was the next point on that, on Israeli war crimes, is the question of the targets being hit, and it's a question of there are two relevant legal points here. I'm not going to go into great legal detail because I'm incapable of that anyway. But air, or in fact now on the ground by tanks, by artillery, by infantry soldiers, the targets being hit. To make that legal, it must be necessary to hit those targets if there is a possibility of civilians being present in the vicinity of them and civilians being killed or wounded. You cannot lawfully attack a target if there are civilians there unless it's necessary to do so. There are obviously military targets, it's not necessary to do it, but there's got to be a question of necessity. Rocket launchers that are sending missiles into your civilian population, command centres that are controlling it, terrorists who are running around the place organising it, these are all, and munition stores and so on, these are all necessary targets, there's no question about it. No one would possibly, well I'm sure some people would disagree, but no sensible person would disagree. So that requirement of necessity, I think, is pretty plain. The second requirement is proportionality. Now, the global media believe, as many politicians I've heard speaking, believe that proportionality means that Israel has taken, what's the current rate, current civilian death rate in? 3, okay. You see civilians around a military target, you don't attack. They've saved that military target, it can be used again. But they would prefer, in my judgment, they would prefer that you did attack it, because it gives them more propaganda on the international stage. It's what I think Professor Alan Dershowitz referred to as the dead baby strategy, which is not common, not unique to Hamas by any means. It's used by many different groups, including, of course, the Taliban in Afghanistan, who are desperate to get our forces to kill their kids. They've attempted to kidnap civilians. They've attempted to send people through their tunnels, and the tunnels equipped with drugs, handcuffs, so they can kidnap, capture, bind civilians and to massacre civilians as well. They have breached a humanitarian ceasefire agreed by the parties, agreed by the Red Cross. They breached that ceasefire. It is a war crime. They also used child soldiers. Now, I don't believe I'm right. I don't believe that's specifically a war crime, but it is certainly something that is generally, I think, by the international community is believed to be a bad thing, and but hasn't really been commented on or highlighted. One thing I would say is there's an organisation called ChildSoldiersInternational.org, and they highlight cases where children are used to fight wars. Nowhere will you find Hamas in the frame for using child soldiers, but you will find Great Britain in the frame for using child soldiers. We're one of their biggest targets. Do you know why? Because we recruit boys and girls of 16 years old to join the army, and they then do 2 years of academic and military training, and then when they're 18 they can actually join the forces proper. President Obama, Prime Minister Cameron, Ban Ki-moon, I always get him and that other chap mixed up, Kofi Annan. Ban Ki-moon, Kofi Annan was in my day. These Clegg, nothing to, in my view, there are of course very good people marching, very worried about children, men and women getting killed, but the whole thing was orchestrated in order to provide anti-Israel sentiment. And that's reflected, the pressure, the public pressure, it's reflected in the statements by these leaders as well. And what it does, it validates Hamas's policy.